Right, first and foremost, thank you for joining us on a brand new show. It's a pioneering show called Go Open.
Thanks for having me on the show.
Let's get right into it and talk about the history of Linux Journal. How long after the advent of Linux and the GNU project from Richard Stallman did you decide to start up such a periodical?
Well, I am not the original editor of Linux Journal. The original idea of Linux Journal came from Phil Hughes and Bob Young. And Phil is still a publisher, and Bob Young went on to be one of the founders of Red Hat Software. So Linux Journal has had several editors over the years, and I joined in the year 2000.
What did you do before you joined Linux Journal?
Oh, I worked for one of the Linux vendors. Before that, I was with a web development firm, and before that, I was at a biotech company.
And why did you choose to join Linux Journal?
I saw it as a really good opportunity to work with the people who are doing some of the innovative software before it gets out to as many of the vendors and some of the slower adopting customers. What we find, and Doc Searles, who's one of our editors at Linux Journal, has done a lot on this, we find that some of the innovative IT-using sites are actually ahead of the curve in adopting new software compared to the IT vendors. So we'll run articles about things that people are doing, for example, in manufacturing processes with RT Linux, or in advanced database replication with Postgres, or especially in internet-intensive areas such as spam filtering that really haven't made it into the conventional vendors yet. So Linux Journal gives me a chance to work with some of the Linux sites, the cutting-edge companies that are running the things you're probably going to be picking up on in the conventional IT media in a few years.
Let's go straight into the aspect of, we have terms like free and open source software, we have open source, we have free software, we have proprietary software. All that, how does, from you in journalist perspective, how do you metal through all that out?
Well, I like to compare it to, what if you were the editor of a cooking magazine and you personally had a religious or ethical aversion or prohibition from eating pork, but you had really good recipes that had swine in them. As an editor, you have to be willing to look at business models and political and ethical decisions that you wouldn't make, but that the readers can still learn something from.
What decisions wouldn't you make?
I make the decision that if it's using Linux in an innovative way, then I'll run it, even if it's something fairly controversial, such as weapons systems, nuclear weapons labs, or proprietary software.
Now, you as a journalist, what is your opinion on free versus open?
Oh, I think that everybody who's trying to promote or sell or advocate software has their own purpose in mind for doing it. And if you're somebody with a broad political and ethical goal, such as Richard Stallman and the Free Software Foundation, then it's important to emphasize the freedom, to emphasize the fact that by participating in using, modifying, re-releasing software on a free basis, that you're becoming a better person, and you're doing something that is good for everyone in the long term. If you're an IT vendor that has a more narrowly focused perspective, you just want to get customers not to be afraid of being locked in if they choose your product opposed to someone else's product, then for an IT vendor, you might want to emphasize the open aspect. You might want to say open standards, standards compliant, and use those kinds of terms. So which terms you use really depends on the goal that you're trying to get across. And for our readers, there's a long-term goal, a long-term expectation of being able to hang on to, work with, continue to use your own work. And when someone has been burned several times by committing to putting their own work in a way that it depends on proprietary software, and later on wants to keep control of their own work, then those people are going to be very receptive to the message of freedom. So I use the word freedom pretty often when I talk about software because it does matter to the user and especially to our readers.
Let's talk about Richard Stallman. I'm not going to be very elaborate, but what's your opinion about the man?
There's a famous saying that's attributed to John F. Kennedy. When he was giving a dinner for Nobel Prize winners, he said, "There has never been so much," I don't have it word for word, but he said, "There's never been so much brilliance and achievement in this room in the White House before, except possibly when Thomas Jefferson dined alone." And what Richard Stallman has done is he's anticipated a lot of the arguments and the controversy that would have come up regarding free software, and especially the GNU General Public License, as it became more popular. So a lot of the controversy that people are having right now, asking about the GPL and patents, or the GPL and how it interacts with proprietary software, are things that Stallman's already anticipated. So you can go back to some of the things that he wrote in as far back as the mid-1980s and see where he was going with all this. So he's thought a lot of this stuff out quite a few steps in the future, and a lot of the arguments that we're having right now about free software are things that he's already addressed.
And he's seen, by the way he speaks, as quite evangelistical in nature. And he also seems to be quite opposed to the whole open source movement. Do you think that's justified?
Open source started out as a marketing term to put a brand name on free software in order to get it more corporate acceptance. The software industry goes through periodic buzzword cycles every few years, whether it's object-oriented programming, extreme programming. A friend of mine who's a proprietary software developer said he just took a seminar in Scrum development, so that's the new one. And open source got a boost from one of those IT industry trend bandwagons. So I don't think that the people who actually do the work, whether they identify their work as free software or identify their work as open source, have a conflict. There's really an argument that makes good media, makes good things to write web pages about. And on the internet, any movement looks like a big argument.
Let's get into that argument. Open source you referred to as being a marketing tool, and it's really helping the open source movement to get out there, and for perhaps users that haven't ever interacted with products like Linux to now be involved in it.
Sure. It's a very effective marketing term, just like, say, certified Angus beef or the organic fruit and vegetable logos. It's very effective.
The other battle, we talk about free versus open source. Now we talk open source versus proprietary. Again, that's another battle. How do you look at that, the war of words there?
Proprietary software companies and people who advocate proprietary software don't put their licenses